Well, welcome back to the Communication Mastery Podcast with me, Mark Williamson. This is where we're unlocking the power of understanding so we can build bridges and not boxes. And we want to help you grow your communication mastery. And I'm glad to have Jeff Williamson with me again today. Jeff's an author we've had on the podcast before. We talked about his first book, Still Marinating, and that was a great conversation. But today we're here to talk about his second book, The Other Side of the Coin. And another great book, Jeff. Great to have you with us.
Yes, happy to be here. Thank you.
So for the sake of the folks who maybe missed the first episode, just fill us in a little bit about you. How did you get to be an author? And what's the story of Jeff?
Well, how much time do we have, right? No. So I guess just, along our work lives and things of that nature, there's just been, a lot of leadership opportunities that I've had and been presented with. In terms of being an author, though, it just got to be a part where, so many people have poured into my life and have really, mentioned, hey, have you ever considered this, consider that? And I think in terms of writing, like Doogie Howser at the end of his show, he would always, type and just talk about whatever life lesson he's had. But that's how I reflect. That's how I, no pun intended, that's how I marinate. So that just, it made sense for me. And have had a great reception with both books. And it just was just my way to pay it forward. You go to that Starbucks line and if you don't prepay for your order, sometimes you are able to help pay for somebody else's order so they can have that, just feeling of a better, humanity and a better, world that we live in. And it's just kind of in the same way how I'm trying to pay it forward with all the lessons that I've been blessed with and by.
Yeah, that's cool. And this one is full of more great lessons, just like the first one. And but yet at the same time, it is very different from Still Marinating. But the two kind of complement each other. It's almost like they dovetail. It's almost like it's the same guy wrote them or something. But
yeah.
but so tell us a little bit about the journey of writing this one. How did you get to the content here? What have you put into it? And what was the journey to get there?
Yeah, I mean, the first book I wrote, it was just, along the lines of I had no idea that I was going to do anything else after that fact. But it just, like I said, it just really, caught fire and just people seemed like it resonated with them. So I'm one in the Enneagram. I'm an 8. I'm a challenger. Some people love it. Some people, not as much. But it's just always trying to think, even in terms of innovation, Patrick Lencioni's 6 Working Geniuses. I'm always thinking about other ways or how we can, is there a better way to try this or to try that? And I just had this dynamic thought on my heart and just that I couldn't shake that, far too often we do the same thing over and over. It's you hear about the definition of insanity all the time, but where's the application with that? Where are we actually moving ahead and moving forward? So I was really excited to write the second book. It's more of an evangelic approach, but it also has pop culture references in there. It has history also that I put in there to try to have something for everybody. But it was just kind of one of those things that as I was putting it together, it just was a lot of fun. And the book was almost writing itself. One of those kind of situations. So yeah, it was my first book was about legacy in my journey, but then it's just my journey's been through challenging, some of the things that I've seen. So
right, and so I love that you're pushing past the "we've never done it that way before" mentality, and clearly you had to do that in writing the book.
Absolutely.
But when somebody says "we've never done it that way before" to you, give us a succinct answer to how do you challenge that? How do you answer that?
Well, first off, it's like the fingers on a chalkboard. It just, I have a higher awareness when that happens, I guess, because there's been so many awesome and dynamic things that have changed in my own life because of challenging that. But when I do hear that, it's just this. I think about things like Blockbuster and Kodak, and where Covey even writes about in the Speed of Trust that if there is no change, we then almost can become irrelevant. Right. And I live by this, but the older I get, the less I know. And I think that's so cool because it's just posture of learning, posture of trying to grow, to stay innovative. So it's to try to ask questions open-ended and say, hey, so I understand that you feel this way. that this will never change. But what if it could? What's the next small step? Don't look at the top of the staircase, but what's that next small step that you might consider on where potential of opportunity and change could come in? So it's just been something that, like I said, I've been very dialed into and just very interested in, and it's great now, even as a coach, where I can kind of get people to think differently, find that they have obstacles, but there's also options that go along with those things.
Yeah, no, that's great. And clearly a lot of that, just from reading the book, a lot of that's coming out of your own experience, but also you're adapting it or you're offering it to somebody else's different experience.
That's right.
So talk to us about adaptation a little bit. How do you do that? How do you bring out what is true for you or what you've discovered, but then help somebody else to discover their adaptation or their change that may be different from yours?
Well, so with that, I'm always asked the question, when I'm entering into a potential coaching opportunity, well, who's your ideal client? And it's I don't go after something from a vocational standpoint. It's just who is interested and has a growth mentality, who is somewhat moldable, right? I can take my, past history and things that I've learned, and I can utilize that as experience and opportunity. But to answer your question, where I've really grown and where I try to then, have, be part of our conversations is not even active listening, but it's adaptive listening. It's to try to coach people to not just listen to understand, but listen to potentially even change some of the things that they have in terms of their regular everyday approach. And whether it's somebody that's working in a steel mill, somebody that's a professional sports player, or whomever, there is opportunity. There's always obstacles that people have. Life is not going to be that easy. If you don't have obstacles, I don't think you're trying hard enough, to be honest. So, it's to understand that there is more than one way, and all I try to do and bring to the table is just a different approach, a different way of thinking about things, and it's been pretty successful.
That's great. So you used an interesting phrase there, adaptive listening. Unpack that for us a little bit more. How would you help someone to be an adaptive listener?
So there are 3 styles of listening. There's just listening, or hearing, where you can, the audible side of it, and you don't really pay a whole lot of attention, and you always have that response on the side where you're not really paying attention at all to the conversation. Don't do that. There is active listening, where you're trying to pay attention and you're trying to get the understanding of what the person's saying, but there still is the attempt of having dialogue. Not that dialogue is bad, but you're trying to almost still explain to them where they might have an opportunity, or that where, almost as you're projecting this level of superiority with that person. And then adaptive listening, and that's something that I've tried to really bring into my life, though, is where I'm trying to listen so much so that you might have something to say that I actually might need to change who I am and my approach, in the sense that everybody has their own specific genius, and if we can uncover that and unpack that, it's going to allow me to level up, even selfishly. So if I pay attention long enough, and if I listen very well, or strongly enough, strongly enough, then there's going to be an opportunity for me to grow and learn every single day, where I can then level up myself, which then allows me to lead better and have that ripple effect for the people I speak with and come into contact with.
Right. So there's an openness in your own attitude that gives you that ability to receive from somebody that you're trying to listen to.
That's right.
And I remember in our previous conversation, we talked a little bit about how you got to the place of learning to be open in your attitude. But tell us a little bit more about that. How have you learned? Because it doesn't come naturally to us, does it?
No, it does not.
We like to try and sort of guard our own little fortress too often. So how have you learned, or what do you do to keep that openness?
Well, so I'm also a John Maxwell certified coach and trainer and speaker, and he, if anything else, he does beat into us. Don't be the smartest person in the room, and if you think that you are, then you are, and you're kidding yourself, because you're really not anyway. And it's just this anecdotal approach to understand that if we get out of our own way and we recognize that God puts a tent on all of our heads, and that He has created everybody for a very specific purpose, that, it's almost kind of like not a scavenger hunt or a treasure hunt, but it's like to really try to unpack and figure out where their native genius is, so I can then personally benefit from that. And it was at that point in time where, sure, I've got a lot of education, a lot of certificates, and that's great, but it's still, my lid, John Maxwell talks about in 21 Laws of Leadership, the law of the lid. If I continue to stay where I'm at, then that's all I'm going to be able to lead with. But if I learn other things, and if I open up the opportunity that somebody might actually have a different and more efficient way, wow, how about that? Right. So it just, getting out of my own way, my own arrogance. We are selfish people. We love ourselves, and that's great. We're called to love ourselves, but at the same time, we're also called to love others. And we can truly do that. And Carnegie talks about, love other people, and learn who they are, learn why they do the things that they do, to create and really establish and strengthen that relationship.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's interesting. I love how in every answer you're quoting different books. Here's an author who's a reader, and we both know the phrase that leaders are readers.
That's right.
And I love that you're obviously a man full of books and full of wisdom from books, and that's what you brought through into your books.
That's the attempt, sure. Yes.
I was reading some of the reviews before we got together again today, and one of the reviews on Amazon. Let me see it here. That one of the reviewers said, Jeff is transparent about his life and how he's overcome certain struggles on his own leadership journey. Another one said, I appreciate his practical advice on how to start thinking about your life and not just letting it happen to you. I love that concept of that you're transparent with the journey you've been on. But talk to us about transparency, because how much is too much? How much is not enough? What do we lose if we're not transparent? What do we lose if we're too transparent? Talk to us about transparency a bit.
Well, and again, to refer back to a book in 7 Laws of Trust, I mean, Covey does talk about, can you be considered too trustworthy, too, where it's almost to this level of gullibility. And even one of my, from good to great, talking about level 5 leaders, one of the level 5 leaders in my life said, he would rather be so much more trusting and have that trust be burnt versus have these walls that we create. And I bring that to your question, where being transparent and potentially oversharing, if I was stoic and if I had these walls created, which I have had, how great of a relationship am I creating if I'm doing that? But if I'm trying to build relationships, I need to be vulnerable.
Right. I
need to be open. I need to be transparent. Hey, I've seen this thing before, and I screwed it up even worse. But here's what I've learned from that. Yeah. A quick story. I was part of, from a transparency standpoint. You see me, I've got tattoos, and I speak, a little different, and that's fine. But in being who I am, I also played basketball, since I was born, and I was part of this 40 and older league. I was getting older. So I was part of this league, and I was the Rudy of the team. I was the heart and soul behind it. I was not the most talented guy. But, I worked hard and tried hard, but one of our players, he blew out his knee. So I'm like, hey, well, let's just pray for this guy. And they, let's what? I said, yeah, just come here. We'll be fine. And we all prayed over this guy. And I think it might have been like one of the first times they were part of that. But just being there in that moment and being transparent then allowed for, a few months later, one of the guys' dads passed away, and they had no church opportunity. They just weren't in that mix. And, who did they then call, when that opportunity came? And it was myself. And so it was just cool to be around people that had, neck tattoos and had bracelets around their ankles, just so that Horry County knew where they still were. But to be in that mix with them and to be able to, lead a message, of salvation to where they could even hear it from, but spoken in such a way that they understood it differently than, where, the church walls would even show. So it's be transparent, be open, because you really have no idea what's going to come. And those opportunities, they're right around us all the time, but it's for us to have our awareness be open to it. So, but you'll be missing out on every one of them if we don't kind of let down our guard a little bit.
Right. Yeah. No. So I'm hearing awareness and adaptability kind of working together as a team.
That's right.
In what you're saying. Is that, yeah. So talk to me about how you've grown your awareness, because you meet different kinds of people. You've
That's
already,
right.
in your story about the basketball team there,
Yeah.
you've got a whole bunch of different folks from different backgrounds, different styles of communicating, different life stories. So how have you grown your awareness of how to connect with different people?
Well, I mean, it's this level of just remain open. Mac Lake, who was another leadership coach, the father of Brandon Lake, I was speaking with him, and he just mentioned that and I'm in the music world too, so I play the bass guitar, and it says if we're EQing people every single day, then that's the sign of a good leader. EQ, what's that? And it's to encourage for E. So try to find a way to encourage people, try to find a way to meet them where they're at. And that's potentially, a little bit uncomfortable, unusual for us to think about somebody else. But then it's to ask a question. So that you encourage and you question, and it's your way to try to stay engaged with other people. It's to remove yourself, to take away, what you feel is the most important thing here, but to put someone else's needs ahead of your own. And in doing that, it causes a stronger relationship. It causes people to be able to open up to you more, to really establish more of that collaboration and communication connection.
Yeah, I love that. Cool. And actually, I realize that's what we're doing in the podcast. I'm trying to discover more about you by asking you questions, because we all learn when we can draw out what somebody else has in them. Yeah, I love that. And that was one of the other things that came through in one of the reviews that I read, was just that whole ability to draw out of people a fresh approach or a change of mindset. I guess that a lot of our listeners could well be drawn to that. As I would love to be able to change maybe a stubborn mindset or a closed mindset, or I'd love to break out of that kind of rut that I've dug for myself. What would you say to somebody who says, I want to make a change like that? I mean, obviously buy the book, but what else would you say to somebody who wants to get out of a rut like that?
Yeah. So, and anyone I coach, there's no secret to it. There's no secret sauce. But I was trained with the idea of, it's called AOOA. And it's so we can even self-coach ourselves, but it's to understand, hey, what is our agenda? That's the first A. What's the approach? What's going on? Let's just kind of have it, set the frame. But then the first O is, what's our obstacles? What is our one thing that's trying right now in the moment? What's the thing that we are seeing that's kind of causing friction? So identify what that thing is. And sometimes that can actually be a little bit more difficult than we think, because we can just be frustrated. And it's the idea of asking why 5 times. You can eventually get to where the crux of the matter is. But then the next O is options. Okay. And that's where, I feel like I've been pretty successful. Right. Where if you stay in your own culture, you're staying with the people that you have in your circle of awareness and that you're rubbing elbows with, they're going to give you examples and thoughts that they're close and comfortable with. And it might be things that you've already tried, but where I have a fresh approach, because I don't know what it is to be in steel work or to be a professional sport athlete, or to be any of these things. But I do know what it is to be, a professional thinker, in this sense, to consider different options. Have you tried this? Have you thought about this? Research has said this. And then it's just kind of really causing those options to try to come to light. And certain things are going to really say, this works for me. Certain things said, that was a horrible idea. What else you got? And that's okay. But then it's the agenda, it's the action items, it's the application. It's like on church on Sundays, we can say, well, that was a great message, but did you actually do anything with it? Yeah. Right. Or, hey, thanks for all these options and conversation, but what is your application steps? What's the next small step that you're going to take in this environment? So it's to, put legs to some of the conversations that we're having. Right.
Yeah. So that there's actually some steps that follow, and it's not all talk and no action.
That's right. Yeah. And it's not a one size fits all. It's not a miracle drug pill that you can take one time. I am not that good, right? But again, the human mind is that complicated, where it's going to take a repetition. It's going to take, recreating those trigger moments like, James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits. You got to re-change your environment. You got to make things a bit more just satisfying and just pleasing, so you can then kind of make those tweaks.
Right, so that then you can draw in that the neuroplasticity
That's right.
To be able to make a change. Yeah,
that's right.
But it has to be something you can repeat regularly, and that's something that I run into often as well as I'm coaching purely in the communication space, is helping people to adapt out of their preferred style into a different style. I know for you, your career journey or your work life has kind of brought you into all kinds of different segments of the working world. You've been in education, you've been in banking, you've been in coaching. Talk to me a little bit about how you've had to adapt your style of connecting with people and communicating with people in some of those different settings, maybe from a different season of life, or even as you're switching between settings in this current season.
Yeah, I mean, and that's been a heck of a ride. We're coming up, this May will be 27 years of marriage, and we've actually moved 16 times in that time frame.
Wow.
So still the same vocation, being in finance and banking and being in a leadership position where I am training and coaching and teaching, but been in a couple different countries, different states, different markets, rural, suburban, or all you can think about. And while there is somewhat of a familiarity in terms of the overall vocational approach that we're doing, it's still very dynamically different based on where we're at and in the demographic. As customers are different, as are the team members that are part of those programs. So it's to try to meet them where they're at, try to understand it, and it starts with those relationships. Again, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I mean, you've heard that said multiple times, I'm sure, but it's to try to meet them where they're at, see how I can meet their needs, excuse me, and to best break through some of those obstacles and say, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered that? I bet you're going to be great at this. Let's I'll meet back in so many days or hours, depending on what we're talking about, and see what kind of successes you've had. But it's really, as we go around, coaching really is just listening. It's to the part of having them feel that they are important, meeting where they're at, saying, I care about you, what you're saying matters. And with that, it's that vulnerability and some of that transparency that you were asking about earlier that allows for those relationships to kind of, and not that we're manipulating things, but it's like, I'm in that space because I do care about seeing people becoming better versions of themselves. So in doing that, it allows them to see usually a lot better success that they've seen from the past.
Right. And so it sounds like the transparency that you bring to that coaching relationship almost opens the door for them to be able to be open themselves to any solutions that they may discover just by the conversation or the interaction.
Yeah, I mean, today I wore a one-tone color shirts, but having tattoos and usually my shirts are a lot louder than they are, and I'll wear Nike Air Force Ones a lot of times. So just seeing me walk by, their guard is let down,
right?
And it's just, I don't do that purposely, but I like the style. But at the same time, though, if I wore a suit and a tie and just was very stuffy, and if I was Mr. Williamson, and it would take a lot longer to try to reach these, whatever obstacles are even had. People are gonna, say, I don't even want to talk about my issues. But just, I guess, the more relatable you become, the easier you can kind of get into what's real.
So I'm curious, having read both the books, have you always been that relatable, or has that been a journey for you?
That's a good question. I think for as much as they say that, from a Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, or even the DISC, how you can change as you grow older. I've always been relatively extroverted. I'm becoming a bit more ambiverted. The longer I'm married to my wife, and she likes to have her solace and her quiet time, and I'm learning to really enjoy that too. But with that, it's been relationship first. I've always been one that kind of chases those relationships and to see how, not necessarily how I can add value. That's been a little bit more more so the older I've gotten. But it's just, I've always been pretty, interested in trying to meet new people, learn things, so I can be better. But now it's like, how can I take that now and give it back? And how can I, lead others well because of these things?
Right. I love that. And so we started out a little earlier talking about you can only really help people who know they want help.
That's right.
It strikes me that not everybody is wired in that extrovert kind of way that you have been and still are, even though you've backed off a little from the extrovert. And so how would you help someone who feels like they're kind of stuck in their sort of introversion there? I want to keep to myself, but I also want to change. What would you do there?
Well, I mean, again, it's the first, part is just the recognition of opportunity. Whether it's somebody that's introverted or not, I don't really, it more so depends on what the crux of the issue is. If they want to get out of their own way and become a bit more dynamic relationship, from a relationship standpoint, then we kind of discuss ways that we could try to find, like networking opportunities and different things where they can kind of have that next small step. But in all things here, with an introvert and with my wife, for instance, and not to get into the nitty gritty, but
don't push anybody under the bus.
No, but it's just, asking for permission. Say, hey, I have this couple thoughts here, I'd like to share them with you. And, do I have your permission to share this? Or would you like me just to listen today? Right. Introverts, I find, are somewhat, they shy away because they just they don't feel listened to, even though they are just as important as extroverts. So again, it's just trying to create that opportunity, create that relationship with, and then, with that, you'll find kind of where those obstacles come, whether it be that they want to be more dynamically seen, which usually isn't the case for an introvert, but more kind of seeing we can tackle, whatever they're coming up with.
So with the introvert helping them step forward, it strikes me that we have different communication styles, and different folks have different approaches to making steps forward. But I think that with the challenge of somebody who's not sure of what they bring to the table, that can often cause them to hold back. Yeah. What's been your experience of helping people to see what they bring, what maybe their strengths are, or what maybe they have that's hidden to others, but maybe they haven't seen it themselves because others haven't seen it? It's discovering what they're bringing. Yeah. As a doorway into making that step.
Well, even this past weekend, not to stick with my wife here, but she and I both led some sessions at a conference that we were part of, and we talked over Gary Chapman's 5 Love Languages. And I think communication styles and a lot of personality really get wrapped into how we feel loved and how we excel in relationships. Mine is words of affirmation, gifts, physical touch, and the others are quality time and acts of service. So it's to try to understand how that person thinks, how that person, really navigates through situations. And it's the idea is like, okay, now that I understand that, and I could even say bringing DISC in, and now that from a communications assessment standpoint, now I understand how you communicate. Let's kind of conjoin these things and how we can then see where you potentially might shine differently in these areas. Now that I know where you see favor, like if you're someone that wants to serve well, then great. Okay, let's find out ways where we could open up and create opportunities on how you could serve. But if I also know that you're going to be, in terms of DISC, a high S, which is supportive, you're not going to want to be the person that's going to want to be the spokesperson and talk about all these things, where I'm a high I, in terms of an influencer, and I don't mind talking. So it's just trying to make sure you find out where their strength zones are, trying to understand where they can shine, really go through and learn how that person thinks and speaks and how they feel valued, and then try to, plug them in. Right. It's like the old vocational test to see whether you could, what job would be the best thing for you. So it's really the same premise, but it's just trying to kind of starting backwards and kind of working your way forward.
Right. Yes. And that vocational test could sometimes end you up in all kinds of
Yes.
cul-de-sacs. I had a friend one time who took that vocational test and said, you would make a great funeral director.
Oh, boy.
And they about ripped the test up.
Don't read into that at all. Yeah.
No, exactly. But, and it's interesting, you've mentioned multiple different profiling tools, and I know that you're not familiar with the communication IQ that I use primarily, but one of the things that I've found very beneficial with the communication IQ is that it doesn't put you into one box, but it actually gives you points of connection with other people, because everybody's got all 7. It's just to a degree. Yeah. And so particularly for folks who tend to be more to themselves and tend to have more of a challenge coming out and recognizing what they have to offer, seeing the strengths of those languages that they're strong in and helping them see that other people have got those same languages, but maybe less so, helps them to see, well, I actually have something to offer if I've got more of this than they do.
That's right.
And so that opens a door. In a similar kind of way to what you're talking about in the other side of the coin of changing the "we've never done it that way" mentality to recognize, oh, actually, what we have here has potential and not just limitation.
That's right.
So let's circle back to that whole idea of breaking out of "we've never done it that way before." Talk to me a little bit about seeing potential rather than limitation.
Well, I mean, my marriage is a testament to that. Like I said, coming up on 27 years, and I'm certainly trying things differently than I did back from 1998. And if I just continue to push on those things that I thought were very important, I'm certain that my marriage would not be as good as it is today. To where I'm really learning full well about my spouse and really learning who she is, how she thinks, how she communicates, how she wants to serve. And it's for communicators, leaders, spouses, for us all I think it's the challenge is to learn that behavior so we can then, allow, if we feel led to lead people, to put them in a space where they can feel like they are adding value and that they are leading well. Right. So I enjoy the challenge of that because, again, the definition of insanity says continuing the same thing over and over, looking for a different result. And I don't enjoy keeping my hand on the stove if it's hot. It's like, this is hot. I don't want this. I'm going to try something different because, there's got to be a better way. And that goes along with communication, with leadership, with opportunity, with you name it, that is there.
Yeah. That's great, and you're obviously a guy who's wired to look for potential, and I wonder if that actually develops that skill in you of overcoming limitations alongside other people, because you're always looking for the potential. You want to see change. You want to make things better.
Well, I think we all have that ability. It's like the circle of awareness. If you're just driving down 501 one day and you're like just having a good old time. But then a week later, you're deciding, well, I need to buy myself a blue car. And then, all of a sudden, there's blue cars everywhere. Right. They were always there all along. But at the same time, now that you're becoming a bit more dynamically intentional about these things, you're like, wow, well, there's this blue car here, this Ford, this Chevy, this whatever. And, it's just ever consuming. And my joke is I do that with gas stations until my truck says you have 25 miles left. Then I become a bit more aware of gas stations when my wife is, on the other side. We're as different as the day is long, but she doesn't go below a half tank. I like to get down to the nitty gritty of that 25. But those gas stations have always been around. But it just, again, when that meets a priority within our own lives here, that's when we start to pay attention to it.
Right. So you're wired to only really see the problem when it's definitely a problem, whereas your wife seems to be more wired to see the problem before it's a problem.
Well,
would that be fair to say?
It's the definition of when the problem is seen.
Right.
Where our line of no return potentially is. I think everybody can see different things differently, and they can say, well, here's where my level of comfort is, and growth means discomfort sometimes, so it's pushing past maybe that line a little bit. I don't foresee my wife ever going to 25 miles left on her gas tank, but maybe a quarter of a tank one day, right?
Right.
Maybe she'll get there a little bit. But,
maybe, yeah.
Who knows?
Presumably, you're having as much influence on her as she's having on you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's good. One of the things about the book is that you want us to rethink our approach to problem solving.
That's right.
And we just talked about problems and how we see them. So tell us a little bit about how you'd like us to rethink our approach to problem solving. What do you think is the better way for us?
Well, I think that problem solving, is one of the things that doesn't get a lot of thought behind it. It's that, hey, we've just done it this way. This is just kind of our mode of operandum. This is how we're going to approach things. But the more we research, the more we kind of dig in and find out that there are different ways. That's kind of when things have been really dynamically different for me. I'm even reading a book right now, The One Thing, and it talks about, we can, say, well, I'm going to solve these problems by multitasking this and this. And I know in certain situations you have to multitask, but the more we multitask, the worse we actually get. It's trying to make the one thing, make the main thing the main thing. And I've only been, this is like not, it's more groundbreaking for me even because I'm learning it as we go. But I'm one that was a checklist creator. And it was because I felt great for crossing things off and doing all these things. But it's like, what is actually making it to my checklist? What am I actually putting on there? Are they things that are just nice to do's, or are they things that if I accomplish this one thing today, will I, create more of a buzz for the books, or will I be able to have led 2 or 3 people differently and better because of these things? So it's from a problem solving standpoint, from a calendar standpoint, but then more dynamically, we're trying to always pay attention on ways that we can level that part of it up, the better we're going to be. And I'm even going into a spot now in one of my other books I'm writing right now. It's about trying to tie, I'm a legacy-minded person. I know pretty well what I want to be known as and known for, not what I left behind, but what I'm known for. But are those things on my calendar today? I'm an achiever. I'm one that's going to go through and check the boxes that are on there, and I'm going to do them well. Yes. Not to be arrogant, but it's like, I'm going to give my best because God calls us to give our best. But are these things also, giving life, and are they fruitful for what I also want to be known as and known for? And that's been just one of these just mind-blown challenges that I'm really trying to work towards. And that came from, hey, what is the best opportunity to problem solve this thing or that thing? And so as I'm currently unpacking it, it's just been a fun opportunity. And like you mentioned, I'm trying to learn more about it through research. So I'm writing about it. Right. So that's going to come out, who knows when, but it's in process.
It's in process.
Yes.
It's on the way. It's fun. So I want to just say for the listeners here that Jeff, for me, really exemplifies so many of the communication IQ languages that we talk about so often. You've heard him talk about the way he encourages and is enthusiastic to connect with people. That's the influencer language. But then he's researching by writing and digging into some of these topics. He loves to read. There's the contemplator language, discovering new stuff. But then he's talked about how he's learned to be connecting more with his wife and caring in that way. And there's the responder language, and then he loves to make his to-do lists. There's the doer language. Every language is coming through in his conversation, and I know you're not familiar with the profile, Jeff, but you are actually demonstrating for us how powerful it is to recognize those different languages in the different facets of our lives.
Thank you.
And that's why we love having you come in and talk about this stuff, because it's that ability to switch into any language that gives you that ability to connect with other people. Right. I wanted to ask you one more question, just to sort of wrap it up, if you like. But this comes out of one of the reviews that I read about that whole idea of giving us ways to think about our lives and not just let life happen. So if we want to be intentional moving forward from this episode, what would you suggest the listeners do to actually think about their lives, to actually engage something that's going to move them forward out of what we've always done into what's possible?
Yes, thank you. a dream that goes unrealized is just a wish. And it's just something that, I wish this or I wish that. And, it's to recognize that there's opportunity in some of these dreams that we have. And you would have asked me this question 3 years ago, while I was writing this book. I'm like, who am I to write this book? But it's that next small step. As, in coaching or as, in things like this, sometimes we feel stuck, and it's just the idea that we can get so overwhelmed. There's so many things that are calling for our attention, but it's to understand that we are people of great value. And, that's tough sometimes to hear and to understand, and we can kind of even get, Jamie Crumlinian talks about the idea of self-worth versus self-confidence, and we can get so captivated by, which camp we're in, and we can struggle sometimes on where we are. But it's to understand that we are people of value, and we are worthy people, because God has created us individually to go out in the world and make disciples of every nation, and to not to go evangelical, I guess, but it's just one of those things that, to understand that, though, it doesn't mean that we're to exercise that fully. It doesn't mean that we need to tell Netflix that we're still there anymore. And believe me, there's times that I've done that, and you kind of start to question your life and say, hey, wait, what am I doing here? But even to being transparent, I deleted 2 video games off my phone because these were things that were getting in the way. They were getting in the way of that next first step. Not that you can't have enjoyment and that, but it's I'm giving a long answer to a short question, but it's the idea, though, of now that we understand these things, is to try then to track and say, okay, well, what's the next small thing I can do? Yeah. Hey, if I want to be known as someone that has written a book, I need to write a page then. It will be imperfect. John Maxwell talks about all of his books. He goes, my first few were not great. And I think he said his third one was the really good one. But it's the idea that, if I want to be someone that's known as a marathon runner, I can't just think about, hey, this would be nice, and, I'm going to start eating fruit and this and that. You actually have to go outside and at least start walking.
Yes.
You have to start going and putting action into what some of those changes would be. So it just comes down to, are we, if we have these desires, we have these dreams, and we want to make these small changes, but are we willing to make the small sacrifices to see, what the outcome would look like? Yes. And if we're not, and that's okay. Maybe it's something that we might need to rethink some. But at the same time, though, if it's something that's worthwhile, if our why is strong enough, if we recognize the purpose behind it and how we can, truly, become better within society because of these things, then it's what's that next small step.
Excellent. So what's that next small step?
That's right.
That's great, Jeff. Thank you. So your next small step could be to buy Jeff's book, The Other Side of the Coin, where he'll help you to do that. Or maybe don't do it alone. Grab somebody like Jeff, who's a leadership coach, or somebody like me who can help you communicate with other people. But take that next step so that you can become all that you're designed to be, all that you have the potential to be. Jeff, this has been really helpful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Glad to have you back on the podcast.
Yes, sir.
And to all of you, keep growing your communication, and we'll see you back here next week.